Imagine you're a clean tech startup working on a project to try to reduce emissions and passionate about reducing the impacts of climate change. The thing about startups, and this is true of those in clean tech as well, is that most are either really good at the tech side or really good at the business side. Founders tend to lean one way or the other. But to scale, to be able to make a big impact in lowering emissions, you've got to balance both. You need to understand the technical solutions needed to address the problem and the business infrastructure to make it viable in the market. Which means, whatever side of that spectrum your clean tech startup is on, in addition to capital, you probably need mentorship if you want to achieve that balance. This is not an easy task, and so you may wonder how a company acquires this set of tools. Enter Foresight Canada. Foresight is a nonprofit Canadian clean tech accelerator with an ambitious goal: position Canada as the first G7 country to reach net zero. To do that, they are helping propel these companies and their solutions to success. This means creating more fundable companies who are able to translate their ideas into viable, sustainable businesses to enable a net zero future. My name is Isabella Tarasco, Technology Investment Lead with Emissions Reduction Alberta, and I wanted to understand how Foresight is helping clean tech businesses to achieve that balance, to help them scale, and to get them funded. So we sat down with Jeannette Jackson, CEO of Foresight Canada, to discuss the challenges of scaling clean tech, connecting investors to innovators, and achieving net zero in Canada. Here on Carbon Copy. Can you introduce yourself and tell us about Foresight and what Foresight's mission is?
Absolutely. So at Foresight, our goal is to position Canada to be the first G7 country to reach net zero. And we do that as Canada's largest clean tech innovation and adoption accelerator. And so what we do is bring together suppliers of solutions, technologies, products, and services that help decarbonize supply chains or reduce fresh water consumption in various processes. And on the other side, we support the demand side, which is making sure that municipalities and government organizations, as well as pure industry players, can find the right solutions to help them meet their climate targets. And of course, all of that is a great economic opportunity for Canada and all of the provinces and territories that are really leaning in on technologies and scaling solutions that the globe and the world can adopt.
That's great. And can you tell us about yourself and how you got involved in Foresight?
Absolutely. A fun story. I'm a serial entrepreneur. So I started my first clean tech company right out of university. Thankfully, I think I entered the market pretty humble. I stepped out of those stairs and thought, wow, I don't know much, but I do know myself and I want to try to build something from nothing. And so I embarked on a clean tech company, which was called Light-Based Technologies, that I helped scale to 40 people, raising many millions of dollars of supports from venture capital firms in Canada and the US. And then I personally exited and did a few other businesses, both learning experiences and successes, before coming back into the sustainability space as an EIR with Foresight. So I was actually an executive in residence, mentoring a bunch of different companies at all stages and different sectors to help them figure out their value proposition, do some customer discovery work, and just general mentorship across all areas of the business. And in late 2018, when founder of Foresight decided to move on, I raised my hand and said a couple of things. One, I think there's a great opportunity to build on the foundation of Foresight to be the largest accelerator across Canada. And two, we want to do acceleration differently. We want to make sure that we're really leaning in on the critical path to success that ventures need, and that's different for all ventures. to help them scale. And if they don't have a good product market fit, we want to help them get out, refocus that energy into something that will have a higher probability of success. And then on the flip side, we want to make sure that the ecosystem around, the net zero economy is building. So industry, academia, government, and private capital, ensuring they're at the table to help these ventures and entrepreneurs succeed.
Wow, that's quite an impressive background. And it sounds like you are the perfect one to be leading Foresight. So congratulations on that and all the programs that Foresight has. And now, looking at the types of support that you provide to startups, what do startups and SMEs need in comparison to the larger organizations?
For sure. It's funny you've mentioned that, because in traditional cluster theory, SMEs and large industry are bucketed into the same bucket. And the reality is the needs of a small company are much different than a large organization. So a lot of the differences start at the foundation of the company. They are perhaps not an established team with tons of process and bureaucracy. And so while they're nimble, they might be a little bit green in some of those areas. So learning how to work with large industry is certainly something that needs to be developed. Depending on the company, usually a startup is really strong on the technology side or really strong on the business side. They haven't had a chance to figure out the other half of what their startup capacity was. And so we need to really lean in as an organization and figure out, do they need supports in building the business side, or do they need supports figuring out the right product and technology roadmap that are going to get them to scale, and the right supports to execute those roadmaps as efficiently as possible. So that's certainly an area, whereas a large organization has usually figured out both of those two sides of the organization. Another aspect is around capital. As a startup, you're quite limited to certain types of capital, things like debt or operating lines of capital for your business. And so you take a different approach. At the startup stage, you're looking at friends and family, you're looking at grants, you're looking at equity investment from usually different angel groups or even venture capital firms. It's just such a different capital stack to a large organization that's up and running. And then, of course, for us as an organization, we want to tailor our supports to the different needs of the SMEs. Again, some are more further along in capacity and competency in those areas, but that's where we can be flexible with our programs to support.
Wow, that's great. Now, how does Foresight support these startups and SMEs? So if you can give perhaps some examples of the types of models that you use or the types of programs that you have that support the startups.
Absolutely. So we support SMEs and startups through 3 phases of their growth: ideation, commercialization, and scale. And at the ideation stage, they're usually quite early. They have an idea. And so we just want to be a sounding board with some proven tools and mechanisms that can help them vet if they're on the right track. Is the market big enough? Is that idea or seed of an idea, whether it's a technology or a service, is it going to fit, the operating models of the customers that they're trying to serve? And so we have very customized programming for that stage that's supported by EIRs and mentors. The next stage around commercialization, that's where you've decided, yes, we're going to do this, which, as you know, is already a big commitment in and of itself. So we want to make sure we're leaning in on 2 fronts: the business front. So do they have the tools to prepare for fundraising, HR, business development and sales? Can they get the capital that they need to support the growth of the business? And on the technology side, do they have the right team to execute on these product and technology roadmaps? Have they done pilots before? Are those pilots representative of a real customer application? And so we have different modules of our programming, again, supported by later stage executives and mentors, that help them make sure that commercialization phase happens as fast and efficient as possible. And then on the scale up phase, this is when the business is running. I mean, they're in revenue. They're probably not profitable. They might be profitable, but they haven't quite crossed the chasm. And so we want to help them do that and scale up en masse. And so that's where you decide, okay, we don't want to disrupt you We want you to keep doing what you're doing in your business, both working in and on the business, as still at that stage most executives have to do. But we want to identify a critical path to success and figure out that one thing that if you did that thing really well in the next 3 to 6 months, that you'd really be on your path to success. And so all of our programs are really there to support that. And some additional things that we add now that we really have a lot of industry at the table is things like innovation challenges and just general advocacy for the sector. So innovation challenges are a great way to engage industry when you know what some of their needs are. So we have a systemized, de-risked, and cost-effective process for helping industry source, evaluate, test, and implement solutions. And we make sure that we build these innovation challenges on the needs of specific industry partners. And then, of course, on the advocacy side, we're not really experts in policy. That's not where we've spent a lot of our time. But we do want to consolidate feedback on regulation, red tape, funding, and other mechanisms that can help the startup community in this space scale. We want to make sure that we're providing that feedback to different levels of government and organizations that are really bullish on supporting the sector.
Yeah, that's great. I think, understanding what the sector needs and the different, different types of expertise that different SMEs bring to the climate crisis, I think is quite important in helping. Really, I think we're all working towards the same goals, and so ensuring that these folks that have these great ideas can scale and can commercialize their ideas is going to help immensely. And so perhaps we can just shift a little bit and talk about the climate crisis. What do you feel like the role of clean tech startups is in mitigating the effects of climate change and advancing some of these economic priorities in tandem?
For sure. So our framing is generally around innovation. So, innovators and innovative ideas can happen at the SME level. Innovation can also happen at the policy level. Innovation can happen at the corporate level or the financing level. And so if you think about innovation as a path to decarbonize, it definitely starts with making sure that technology companies that are interested in being part of the solution have a good understanding of what the problems are and how they can develop the right product, services, and solutions to fit into those problems, because otherwise there will be an adoption gap. On the policy side, even though we're not policy wonks per se, there is an element of innovation that's possible in policy, which is something we do try to reinforce. And what I mean by that is, instead of perhaps policy dictating how, that they focus on the what. Policy helps set a target, but it gives the market some flexibility in how it's going to achieve that target. And then, of course, on the financing side, from an innovation perspective, there are opportunities to evolve how traditional finance sectors operate. And so we can be more flexible, whether it's different types of loans, different types of capital stacks. I've seen a really interesting program in South Africa, for example, that incentivizes venture capital firms to invest in companies that will help create the most green jobs and reduce GHG emissions or use of fresh water. And that comes back in different forms of tax credits. It also comes back in the form of rebates and things like that. So I think we always try to be someone who's hopefully sparking new ideas and conversations around the role innovation can play across all stakeholders. And then our bread and butter is really into making sure that the venture community and the startup community is supported through all that. And the last thing I will say is generally a reflection on business models broadly is quite an interesting aspect of innovation. Sometimes changing the business model can actually have a significant impact on GHG emissions and water consumption, for example, which is mainly our metrics. And the reason why is because if you look at your business model and you can make it more efficient, you would actually have greater margins to then invest in some of the technologies and solutions that can get you there. So it's a bit of a closed loop mentality from a business model case, because what comes first, the technology or, the industry buyer's ability to adopt. But again, just try to be a catalyst at the table for sparking conversations on how small tweaks in a business model that has perhaps been done the same way for many, many years can give that capacity and resources required to focus on a net zero economic pathway.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think I want to zero in on that business model innovation, and just wondering, for those listeners out there who don't know what that is, who don't know how to get started, who, had the same business model or are going through and working on a specific technology, what would that look like to them? Or what's maybe an example that you could share of business model innovation that you mentioned?
Sure. So for those that haven't done a business model yet, usually a business model from our perspective starts with a business model canvas. And so there are actually quite a few aspects of this canvas. The first is figuring out, what is my value proposition? What is the product, service, or solution that I'm trying to bring to market? And once I've narrowed in on that value proposition, I have to figure out, okay, what are the key activities, resources, and partners that are going to allow me to provide that value proposition to my paying customer? And by the way, have I gone through the right process of making sure that I have the right customer segments and channels to those customers at the table? Finally, you want to make sure that the cost structure and the revenue streams make sense, because a business is only a business if you can have more revenue than what you're spending, unless you're in a growth phase, of course, at which point you're making investments into new technologies or processes. So the important thing to think about in terms of the evolution of a business model, for example, is, let's look at manufacturing of homes for the built environment. So traditionally, what has happened is you are a general contractor, or you hire a general contractor, and you go out and you talk to the plumbing sector, and you talk to electrical and drywall and the framing and the roof and all of the other aspects that you need to make your home work as a home. Well, now there are integrated solutions that allow you to have a more modular approach to home building, whereby the plumbing and the electrical and the insulation and everything are all embedded in panels. And through that process, you can actually not only reduce the cost of building your home, but you can do it much more quickly. So there's a little bit of a disruption in the sector through this thinking, but at the same time, those cost benefits and the value, to the sector is greater than previously designed. So that's sort of just one example of an evolution of a business model. And then as a general contractor, you have to decide, do I want to go with the traditional practices, or am I ready to embark on adopting new solutions?
Amazing. So it looks like it's a whole industry value chain of solutions. So I mean, that's fantastic. Everyone's working together. And before we get into the collaboration across sectors, I just want to ask, and you probably get this quite often, what is the difference between an accelerator and an incubator? Those are always thrown around, in tandem all the time. So for our benefit, what would you say the difference is?
No, that's interesting. I mean, I sometimes even question the term accelerator for some of our stuff. That's why we focus on sort of the output of our acceleration, which is we accelerate Canada's net zero pathway. But from my perspective, an incubator is a little bit more selective, really focused on a few businesses that they're going to lean into and provide really hands-on growth support to, including perhaps hiring the executives that are going to build the business and giving them a home and a space to cohabitate, so that they can, go through all those processes of scaling together. Whereas my view on an accelerator is it has aspects of both helping the venture and the ecosystem grow. And our goal is to increase the pace of things. So to accelerate the speed that the technology gets to market, the speed that adoption is happening, so that we can achieve sort of these bigger outcomes. So that's my perspective. But yes, some people say, oh, you're actually incubating a few companies with your residence program. Well, yeah, I guess we could be. But Yeah, I think as long as you're leaning in and helping the right companies find their right path forward, then regardless, you're doing good for the economy and for, in this case, the future economy.
Emissions Reduction Alberta takes action on climate change and supports economic growth. Our funding helps new and existing industries in Alberta reduce emissions while lowering costs, attracting investments, and creating jobs. That's why, since 2009, we've committed $884 million into 246 projects valued at $7.1 billion in public and private investments. To learn more, visit eralberta.ca. So let's talk about collaboration and the importance of collaboration. Now, Foresight works with a number of different partners across the innovation ecosystem. From your perspective, how can collaboration across different sectors help these startups in driving commercialization? And can you speak to the importance of some of the partnerships that you have?
Absolutely. Well, I think like in any relationship, even for me, I need to figure out what are my strengths as a CEO and what kind of team do I need to fill those gaps so that as a collective we can achieve this big, hairy, audacious goal. And I would say at an organization level, that's what to me collaboration is all about. It's coming together, agreeing that you're going to go arm in arm to try to achieve a specific goal, that you're going to recognize each other's strengths and weaknesses. And sometimes there'll be an overlap, a traditional Venn diagram. And you're going to say, we are all, we're going to do this together and we're going to find the right resources and we're going to implement the right programs and plans and activities that can get us to this end result. So collaboration has been instrumental in our progress as an organization. We started out in BC and we started to get pulled east in different forms. It started off with Platform Calgary, where they wanted to start to look at having programs housed within their facility. And so we came in and provided our launch and deliver program there, which allowed us to get a bit of a footprint. And then the next stage of collaboration in the region was through Actia, for example, where they operated more as a community builder and a membership organization, so more on the advocacy side. And they had to decide, do we create new programs or do we license programs or do we collaborate with someone to run programs? And that's where we landed on the opportunity to collaborate because we had a bit of an engine building. And then that's just continued to be how we've grown across the country, and others have grown through our partnership as well. So collaboration with us is done with funding organizations, other associations that are sector specific, that are perhaps looking to access ventures that help their membership reach certain goals. It's done through government. We've collaborated with government at all levels to figure out how they can improve policy, again, through just sharing information from ventures, how they can perhaps offer different funding programs through COVID. It was a huge all hands on deck on how we keep some of the perhaps vulnerable ventures supported through that uncertain time. And then in general, just network building and making sure that there's sort of bi-directional efforts on deal flow. If an organization, for example, like Emissions Reduction Alberta, doing incredible work, has clear vision, trying to get the right ventures on those big challenges that have funding tied to them, well, sometimes the ventures aren't ready. And so perhaps Foresight can, be an organization before they reach that point to help make sure that the team, the value proposition, the business model, and the competitive advantage for that business is there before they're ready for prime time with an organization like ERA. So our model of collaboration is quite dynamic because in certain relationships, we're filling different pieces. It's not a standard, partnership model across the board, but we just try to make it easy to collaborate with by moving quickly and, again, making sure that we're aligned with the right goals and activities so that we can do more with less together.
Yeah, it sounds like a great progression that Foresight has gone through over the past years. And being around for 10 years, you mentioned some of the changes that the organization has gone through. Can you speak to any others that you've seen over the past 10 years?
For sure. So, we started out as a traditional accelerator. So it was really venture focused and getting them to a point of commercialization. What we realized is that once they reached certain points in that pathway, they were unable to get adoption here domestically and would start to look either overseas or to the south to effectively scale their businesses. And the questions we asked ourselves are, do we leave them and just hand them off and let them go and do their thing? Or do we, through partnerships and collaboration, look at the other side of the equation, which is the demand side and the adoption side? And that's where we've really leaned in over the last 2 years. It's things like innovation challenges and strategies with, again, industry associations and other groups who are really wanting to make sure that we reduce as many barriers as possible, which could include red tape, it could include capacity. Obviously, everyone refers to budgets, and we make it almost foolproof and easy for these accelerated venture technologies to get into domestic industry and government. So that's where we've really leaned in over the last bit, and we're starting to see some pretty cool success through our clean tech adoption platform.
Yeah, that's great. And it kind of speaks to what we heard at our Emerging Innovators Challenge engagement sessions that we held prior to launching the program, is that, some folks feel that there are no opportunities in Alberta because of, XYZ is lacking. And so what would you say to those innovators who are struggling? Would you say that there's opportunity for Alberta for everyone, or would you say there are specific challenges for specific sectors?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. I mean, one of the things that a venture needs to realize is their customer has lots of priorities. And so, while you and your business are your number one priority, in particular during this climate, there are other pressures with inflation rates and interest rates and things like that are going to affect buying decisions on that demand side. I think it's also important for a venture, again, regardless of whether it's Alberta or across the country, that you're only one piece of the solution they need to reach those climate targets. And so understanding, where you fit in a value chain and who perhaps you could partner with to make adoption of your solution easy, not always having to go direct to the end buyer, can be very useful. And that's actually why we designed our venture to value chain mapping project, because, take mining, for example. Well, there's some cool technologies in BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Ontario, Quebec, and the Maritimes. And by the way, not each of them has really unique strengths. And so, looking into the market you want to sell into, but also saying, okay, where else would they be looking for solutions? And how can I understand the network, both in my area and across Canada and beyond, perhaps will allow you to better navigate your positioning and figure out, do you go direct or do you do it through other partnerships and distribution models? But in Alberta, obviously, there's some tremendous strengths around CCUS and hydrogen and agri-tech, agri-food. There's some cool digital technologies, built environment we've seen a lot with. And of course, we'd be remiss not to comment on the fact that there are some really cool innovators trying to lean in with the produced natural resource and resource sector to make sure that there's technology pathways to decarbonize those functions as well. So I think there's, let's get that technology adopted and then export those solutions to other countries that could really use it. And we do a lot of mapping and partner with a lot of folks to do mapping there as well.
Yeah, that's great. And you've mentioned a few industry-based challenges in your discussion. So can you explain Foresight's sector approach and industry-based challenge approach in Alberta and in Canada? What opportunities and challenges does comes along with some of these initiatives?
Yeah, for sure. So what happened is as an organization, we surpassed supporting over 350 Canadian clean tech companies a year, with quite a bit of weight in BC and Alberta. And we realized that we needed to start to segment them into groups so that we could bring in the next level of supports to help them. And so we came up with our next streams. And currently we have next streams for water, carbon management, bioeconomy, built environment, power, and agritech, agri-food. So agrinext is what it's called. And within each of those sectors, we focus on mapping out the solutions across the value chains. We also work with a group of industry buyers that are saying these are our collective challenges. And when there isn't a venture to support that problem, then we'll run an innovation challenge to find a solution. And again, that solution may be at the early ideation stage. It might just not be someone we've had contact with. It might be something we want to import from globally and have them set up a head office or a sub office here. So there's lots of different models in being an innovative community and an innovative province. And sometimes it also can mean attracting the best and the brightest globally to operate in Canada as well. And so those next streams are also a great way for investors and investor networks to more effectively engage and provide their private capital to the sector as well. So certain investors, because of their background, are very comfortable in water technology or carbon solutions or ag. And so we want them to make it easy to find that deal flow and provide feedback to those ventures so that they can scale as well. So those are our sector streams. Each sector stream also has a sort of big, hairy, audacious goal, or a North Star, we like to call it. So for example, for Carbon Next, our goal by 2033 is to help reduce 100 megatons of GHG emissions, from the air through the technology companies that have gone through, that programming. With water, it's reduced leakage to 10% in 10 years. So 10 by 10 is what we're calling it. So we balance sort of a grassroots, bottom-up approach on what have other people identified as technologies that need to be developed, but also what is the one thing in carbon management or water or agri-food that we could do to really reach climate targets and get everyone running in that same pathway. And that's been relatively successful.
Yeah, that's great that you're able to link some of those challenges and provide them with some of those solutions. So, I mean, that's fantastic to hear. Now, thinking to your role leading Foresight, what have been some of the biggest challenges that you've faced? And what are some of the things that you've learned?
So this is a fantastic question. I come from the private sector, so I am very much used to provide a service, sell a product, and make money from that. With an organization like this, we're a not-for-profit. We, do rely somewhat on government dollars, but we also have tried to be very bullish on making sure that the private sector is at the table. But that's taken time to build. I've been in this role for 5 years, and at the time we were 2 people supporting 20 companies. Now we're 50 people with 200 EIRs and mentors supporting over 350 companies this year alone since April. So it's our biggest year ever. And so some of the challenges that we face are, we have this vision on the role we can play as a platform of programs and capacity building supports. And when, governments change or priorities change, right now housing is just such a critical priority. Climate and clean tech get pushed down a little bit. And so just navigating what the future and can look like for an organization like this is just always constantly on my radar. And that's something that we've had to navigate over the last 5 years. I mean, COVID, again, everyone realized they could band together to make an impact, but health was much more important than climate at that time. I think another thing is just learning to really dig in and understand what other activators and who else is acting with a pretty cool role in the ecosystem so that you're filling gaps and really leaning in on that collaborative model. Sometimes as a for-profit, you got your product, you got your goals, you got your revenue, and you're going to go. And that's not, how this organization is built. That's not our core values. But that also means that some of our activities aren't something that someone wants to pay for. And so how do you get, something like that growing and scaling and provide that kind of support to an ecosystem because it's the right thing to do, or because it's going to help with that greater goal, even though it's not a funded activity. And so those have been some of the opportunities and learning experiences that we've navigated as a team. This team is extremely committed and passionate towards, climate, economy, and impact. And I think my learning is I think this is the most representative time in my career when I've been really able to get, a whole tribe on board, going towards that goal. Even though people could be out working and making more money doing other things in other environments. So I don't know, a bit of a ramble there, but hopefully it's not easy running a nonprofit in this space. I mean, the alternative is we start taking equity in companies, we start charging fee for service above at market rates, even though that is a little bit how some industry partners want to work with us, but we realize that to move quick and make decisions, we want to make it easier for anyone that wants to work on their net zero pathway easy. And that means sometimes with cost barriers, you got to make it work. And so it's a lot of off the side of the desk, late night, 80-hour weeks, but I think it's helped create this engine that hopefully folks can rely on and value, whether you're a venture, a partner, an investor who's accessing the companies, or an industry or government partner.
That's great. It's very noble work that you're doing. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
What are Foresight's goals for the next few years?
So great question. We've been pretty steadfast on our 3-year strategic plan, and we're actually at the last 6 months of that plan. And so that included things like becoming a national organization. It included having less reliance on government funding to some degree. It relied on making sure we had the right partners. So we actually had a model to have 50 partners, so that we could leverage and build and work on things together as opposed to going it alone. And we've checked all those boxes already for this year and for this 3-year strategic plan. So we are about to embark on a new 3-year strategic plan. So what does the future look like? We want to continue to be a nimble, responsive, dynamic organization that provides market problem and data-driven programming and initiatives to stakeholders that either want to pay or invest, or that those benefits are validated, by their contributions to the organization. We'd like to see pretty significant results towards the North Stars that each of our sector-specific initiatives have mapped out, which means broadly, we've hopefully seen Canada leapfrog in where we sit currently at the bottom of all G7 countries on GHG emissions, et cetera. So hopefully we continue to be looked at as an activator, an enabler, and an organization that's really promoting Canada's strengths globally.
Yeah, great. Fantastic. And, given you have a ton of expertise in the entrepreneurial space, what advice would you have for innovators starting out in the clean tech industry?
Yeah, great question. So again, as a serial entrepreneur myself, and I looked at Foresight as an entrepreneurial endeavor, by the way. So the first thing is make sure you're doing what you love, because it is hard, right? So find that niche within your idea, within the market that you want to serve, fall in love with it, not to the point where you're naive that it's not working, so that you can really wake up every day and look your friends and family in the eye and say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to stick to it no matter what. To complement that, build a network of people that are going to be honest with you on what's working and what's not. And whether it's Foresight or some of the other great organizations across the country, make sure you have some checks and balances on your strategy, the way you're engaging with different customers and investors, and getting your business model right. So lean on the network. The third thing for me is go as fast as you can. A fast fail is always fantastic. You save time, you save money, and you save emotional disruption. So, you got to keep in mind, again, you're usually a small piece in a big engine, right? And so flushing out your secret sauce and checking that as fast as you can, in my opinion, is going to give you a higher probability of being scrappy and successful long term. than trying to change the whole engine, itself out of the gate. So, yeah, fall in love, get that going. Make sure that you are checking in with folks to give you feedback, and stay focused.
Amazing. Jeannette, thank you so much. It's been fantastic. It's quite obvious that, why Foresight is uniquely positioned to be a leader in growing Alberta's clean tech community. And it's a partnership that we value here quite heavily at ERA as well. We lean on you and your team, and, excited to see what comes in the future. And, before we jump off, I just want to leave it to you to see if you have any parting words or anything else you'd like to touch on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And I definitely have an ask to everyone listening. I would really lean on everyone in both their personal and professional life to pick one thing that they can do to help learn or activate more in the future economy, which for us is a net zero economy. So at home, instead of taking the car, walk to the store, or if you're just less lights, less water consumption, all those things incrementally add up. And if you're in your business or you're in a workplace that would give you or a group of you the opportunity to implement a new sustainability procurement plan, or to just make sure that you're recycling and doing all those extra little things, that would be great. So take one personal and one professional thing that you can do to help be an activator towards the future economy. That would be amazing.
Amazing. Those are great parting words. Thank you so much.
Thank you.